Moving Carroll forward. Together. To keep updated on the COVID-19 pandemic in Carroll County, go to carrollcountymd.gov/COVID-19.
All right. Since Jeff Daggett is on, let's go to him now. And Dennis, you want to just refresh here?
Well, we talked last week about youth sports, recreation sports in Carroll County, following guidelines. What are the guidelines? What are other counties doing? Jeff said he would look at, see what other counties are doing right now as far as youth sports, and then maybe we could look at what we're doing in youth sports, and if necessary, make changes. If not, then it's all good. But we'd like to know what's going on around the state and what guidelines that we're given. So Jeff, turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, commissioners, and good morning. Many of the counties around us, and I'll cite Anne Arundel, Hartford, Baltimore County, they have canceled or greatly restricted youth sports to the degree at which they are not occurring. Howard County has put restrictions in place. However, those programs are still occurring. They have eliminated out-of-state teams coming into tournaments. They've canceled the larger events. They have imposed size limitations on the number of people being able to get together at one time in a program. All of those restrictions are certainly within their capability to put in place. However, all of those restrictions also exceed the orders that have been issued by the governor. So what we have done to date is to remain consistent with the governor's orders. There are recommendations that have been put out there either directly through those orders, through the Maryland State Department of Health or the CDC, but those are recommendations and not orders. So we've tried to share that information with our rec councils, provide that guidance, but we are not currently issuing anything more restrictive than what the state orders are.
All right, so what are the state orders for recreational sports indoor?
Right now, there are none. It's basically based on building capacity, indoor capacity of 50%. And when you look at that, you take a large facility, say a high school gym, you look at 50% capacity, that's a huge number. Trying to reconcile that with what the recommendations are, and some of these limits, 25 or less, you could be talking several hundred people at a 50% capacity. We don't have anybody doing anything like that.
Right, but if you're looking at 50% capacity, what are you looking at? 50% capacity, what the fire marshal says can be allowed in that room? Because then that's actually taking in spectators and everything else. It's not really taking in people that are practicing sports. So I think that's kind of unrealistic to look at it that way. I'm just.
Aren't there limits on the amount of folks that can gather indoor that would supersede the 50%
I thought it was 25.
capacity? Yeah, I think it's 25.
25 for private gatherings. So
that has nothing to do with the indoor sports then. I mean, with the way the COVID numbers are going and everything, I'm just very worried about what the spread could be, because let's face it, if we're inside doing sports, and the two big ones that are going on right now would be wrestling and basketball. If I'm doing either one of those sports, running up and down the court or wrestling on the mat, I'm not wearing a mask. And I'm in contact with other people. And that's fine if that's the way it's going to be done. But I think there has to be parameters of how many people can be in that space at one time. Because I mean, having done a lot of sports in my time, I just know that the breathing and all, and I just can't see how this stuff's not going to be spread. So at least I think we should limit it to what the indoor numbers are, which would be 25. I just think it would be prudent to do that. Jeff, what's your take on that?
I do think a number of programs are doing that already. And if I could, I'd like to share, just to use one of the wrestling programs that is operating, share what it is that they are doing. They have parents dropping off the kids for the programs. Parents do not come in the building at all. So only the children are going in the building. they have masks on, face coverings on the entire time except when they're wrestling. They have health and temperature checks prior to every session that they go through. When they have their drills, then they're in different stations. Those stations are spread out 6 feet or more apart. When they have beginners who are wrestling with each other, and this has been one of the greater points of concern, the person-on-person contact there, the novice groups, they wrestle with the same partner the same time. They only have the one partner, so they're really trying to limit the contact or the interaction between people. When you have the more advanced groups, now you're looking at a group of 4, but it's not expanded beyond that. And this program is limiting attendance or capacity to 20 people or less. So they are, as Ed talked about earlier today, you talk about weighing the risks, and there are some things you can do to mitigate those risks. It's very challenging to eliminate all of those risks without completely shutting down the program. And
Right.
this is what we are trying to navigate through, along with those state orders and those recommendations, and then have our programs operate accordingly.
Right. I'm not interested in shutting down the programs. Let me be clear on that, but I am interested in making them as safe as possible. And what you just described right there seems extremely, well thought out. If we could make that the parameters for, let's say, the wrestling programs, because that seems, that was what you were just talking about. That makes sense to me. And we could have some other parameters for basketball, but I just don't think we should just let it go. Whoever wants to come in and do the sports or whatever, I don't think it can be that way right now. We have to have parameters. I think those are great for wrestling, what you just described. And I'm not saying we're going to go around and enforce them, but these are what we say should be done if you're wrestling indoors and if you're part of our recreation program. That's all I'm saying. We should also have other parameters for basketball. How many people can be there? Just the athletes, practicing, the groups, the mask, all that kind of stuff, just so it's out there. People know what we're recommending, and actually, I guess what we're requiring, but we're not going to go out there and police it. But I just think it has to be out there. I don't know what the rest of you think.
I agree with you, and it sometimes hurts me to say that, but I do. No,
You say it all the time, but go ahead.
I agree. And Jeff, the way you described that, it sounds like it was just very well thought out. Like folks got together and said, okay, let's weigh the risks associated with the impact of the sport. Doing that with basketball would be very important, because what it will end up doing is providing expectations for both the athletes and the parents and the community of how these sports are happening, because without that, it just ends up being a free-for-all. And you're right, Commissioner Frazier, we're not going to be policing this. We're not going to be, the mask police going in there, nor do we want that. But if we provide something that's doable, and we provide expectations, then we're going to, kids are going to get what they need. Parents are going to feel good that they're getting their student athletes onto the mats or onto the court, and that's all good. But right now, there's no real expectations. So that's going to be key. So.
Yeah, I'm good with it too. I was going to suggest we use that as a template.
Yeah, for the wrestling. Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah,
I think
use that as a
what you
template.
described,
Now, there would
yes.
have to probably be, I don't know, a basketball team. I'm trying to think when my grandson played last year, which seems like 87 years ago. But I was trying to think without all the fans in the stands, because obviously that can't happen. But I think there's typically about 8, 9, 10 kids on a basketball team. Can't be more than that, because then you wouldn't be able to.
Right, probably 10 would be max.
But that would still probably meet the 25 or less. Well, don't you think, Jeff?
A lot of times you'll see a roster of maybe 10 kids on a team. If you factor 2 teams in a gym, coaches, assistant coaches, you're at that 25 figure with no spectators.
Yeah, I think that's a good template.
Yeah, and I do think 25 in the gym is a good number. Just my feeling. I know the gyms are large and all, but you're running around in that gym. You're doing a lot of things. You're being very active. And when you don't have the mask on, not just the projection of what you're breathing and so forth. That's why I think the 25 is a a good number to put on there. I know people have said some of those gyms have 6 baskets. We could have people playing all those baskets, but then I think you're going to be getting too close, and I just don't like that idea. But the 25, let them run it. But, I think the 25 cap in the gymnasium, I think, is what we need to do for practices. And again, no spectators, mask when you're not participating, and all the things you just brought up, Jeff. But I think we should put it out there to the rec programs. This is what we expect. I think the parents would feel more comfortable that way too, having their children go to these practices.
Well, first off, I'm not sure there's another sport besides wrestling that's out there, but that's, my 2 cents on that. The high schools practices, you said, Dennis, they're going to start the 14th of December. They're scheduled to begin. Has CCPS put out guidelines on what the parameters are around the sports and how they're going to be conducted?
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
My understanding is that next week is when the Board of Ed meets again, and Mr. Duffy's going to come back with the expectations after talking to the athletic directors of how they're going to do the sports programs. But they're going to be, from what was discussed last night, I believe, like real practices. Now, what the parameters are under that, I don't know yet. They're going to come up with that. The discussion was it's not going to be a return to play kind of thing where you have half group here, half group there, just skills and drills kind of things. It'll be more like real practices. But what the parameters are of that, we won't know until the next Board of Ed meeting when Mr. Duffy has talked to the athletic directors.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Daggett, have we had any rec council outbreaks?
I want to be cautious with the word outbreak. So I will say there have been some individuals who have tested positive, both coaches, volunteers, and players, and they have been dealt with. They have worked through the appropriate protocol with the health department and contact tracing. So yes, I am aware of cases. I could not give you a number, and I would not categorize it as an outbreak.
To address a problem that we don't have?
Well, the question or the comment about having a template to share with the rec councils, and basically the one program, the wrestling program that I referenced, they are using that template, which is the existing state order and the recommendations from the Maryland State Department of Health and CDC. Using that information, they have tailor fit that to their program. A basketball program would do it a little bit differently just by the nature of the sport. Right. But that's the template that is out there. That is what we have communicated to our programs. We can get more specific. We can put a number, a maximum number of people in a building. Again, that would exceed the state order, but it's within our ability and authority to do that.
I'm just a little bit puzzled that if we don't have a problem, why are we trying to put measures in place to solve it?
Because we want to be proactive and it's not reactive. I like to head it off before a problem comes. That's why I'm bringing this up now. I want to wait till we have outbreaks, and I just feel it's just a way to handle the situation.
So other rec councils, besides the wrestling, don't have the same measures, but they're not experiencing any infections or outbreaks.
I don't think.
You mean other rec councils around the state? They're not doing anything. As Mr. Daggett just said, almost everybody except, I think you said Howard County, they've closed everything down. We want to try to keep it open. Therefore, I want to be proactive so we can keep it open.
I mean, as far as like other athletic programs within their borders, they don't have the same policies in place that wrestling has in place.
Each of our councils are different and our communities are different. Excuse me. We have a very limited number of gymnasiums available. So while one community may have basketball and wrestling going on because they have a facility available, other communities may have neither because they have no gym available. So this is a greatly reduced number of children who are participating right now. Normally we have over 45 public gyms available. Right now we have 2. So it's a very limited number of participants.
I will say, some may say that child safety is not our priority. I absolutely disagree with that. Child safety and looking out for our community is our priority. And it would be incompetent of us if we did not address it while trying to continue to maintain the programs and keep them, active, because we know that it is healthy for student athletes to continue to participate, but we want to make it as risk-free or as least risk, associated with their activities. So putting processes in place will allow for good expectations of the student athletes, the parents, and the community. And like it's been said, I think we're one of the only jurisdictions that's keeping rec programs, afloat right now. So that's, so we're moving in the right direction. We, like Commissioner Frazier said, just be proactive in keeping our student athletes, healthy.
But the point I was getting at is we're in process. We have all these students out there and athletes practicing their sport, and we're not suffering from any outbreaks or spreads because of it. And we have a tremendous survival rate of juveniles. I just think we're taking measures to address a problem which does not exist.
Nor do we want it to. That's the problem here. That's the challenge. Because let's be clear again, Jeff, you said we had 45 gyms available. There's only 2 that are operating. So there isn't a lot going on anyway. So, and I don't think there's going to be. Even when the high school sports get back in, those gym times are going to be very limited. So we're not going to be able to increase any of that. So I feel as if there is a program out there, that template that wrestling program is using will allow our youth to continue to do whatever they can do, which is very limited anyway, because there's hardly anything going on. My grandson plays basketball and they're not playing because they don't have any gym and there's no gym space. So if they're practicing, they're doing it outside, and that's a whole different set of parameters there. So I think it's a good move, and I don't think it's a big deal, because even if we do set those parameters, again, there's nothing going on. But if there is, I think
safe.
They should be safe. So if we could use that template, Jeff, even for basketball, even if a program finds a gym, and good luck, I think that's a good template to use. And I think, I don't know, are we concerned about the amount of folks or not? Because I think it's 25. And we're not going to, I'm not going to run in and start counting people.
No, but I
like
think
anybody else is either. But
Right. But I think if we put that number out there, people will most likely follow it and have a good idea of how many should be allowed in there.
I think 25 is a reasonable number. So.
And we can communicate that to the rec councils. Now, for the 2 facilities that we schedule, that will be very easy to do. That can be a condition of the permit to use the building. And that would be North Carroll High School and the Robert Moton Center. That becomes a little bit more challenging when groups rent space at a private facility, because we do not control that facility.
Yeah.
Right. At that point, these are recommendations. You rented the space. It's up to you.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I think we need to put the recommendations out there. I think it's part of our responsibility.
Okay. All right. Do we need to? I always get jammed up on this, whether we're voting or not on these things. I guess we should formally. We're still going by the state guidelines, which is what we already said we were going to do. We're just re-emphasizing what they are, right? We're not doing anything different.
And if it's presented as a recommendation that this would be the maximum number, then that's correct. That would be consistent with the guidelines, but not exceeding them.
Okay.
Just a Carroll County clarification of state guidelines.
Okay.
But I recommend that we put this on an agenda maybe next week to have public discussion, because I think we're going to get a lot of blowback on this, that citizens involved in the rec councils aren't given a chance to publicly comment or chime in on this. So I'd recommend that we hold off until next week and have this on the agenda, because this is really important for our citizens to weigh in on this.
I think we need to make a decision before it becomes a problem. I don't see what the problem is of making a decision on this. Again, we've got 2 gyms or 3 if you count the 2, both gyms at North Carroll that we're working on. It looks like groups are already putting these measures into place. We're just going to formalize the measures that are already being used at Rec Council. I don't see why there'd be any blowback at all.
And actually, we're applauding the effort that they're doing. I mean, we're not limiting. We're saying, hey, this is good, and let's continue to keep these programs, vibrant as best we can. Again, Eric, it's not about survivability. It's about anybody getting sick, and we don't want these kids or anybody that's going to be going into these facilities at risk of getting sick. So this would at least minimize that. So no, I think we should just continue and move forward with this. So.
Yeah, I agree. Re-emphasizing the guidelines, I think, is important here. I think where the blowback would be is if we would shut these things down. Then you're gonna see a lot of blowback. But if there's already a program operating and they're doing it efficiently, then I say kudos, and we are applauding them. And we're just merely re-emphasizing what the guidelines are to those programs that would find a place to start up if they could. And good luck with that, because as we said before, I don't think there's going to be any gym space anyway. But
So we could give direction to Mr. Daggett to get these guidelines in some type of printed form and hand it out to rec departments that are interested in using our facilities. Would that be okay with everybody? I'll make that as a motion.
okay. Yeah, I don't know that we need the motion, but I'll because we already decided we were going to go by the state
Okay.
guidelines.
Then
And
I-
this isn't doing anything different.
All right, then we don't need the motion. I
Yeah.
just have Mr. Daggett.
Let's just re-emphasize the guidelines, as Commissioner Weaver said.
And we will get that communication out to all of our rec councils today, just emphasizing adherence to the state guidelines and then recommendations as far as the maximum number of people.